Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome you to the third annual State of the Science Summit, and make it a good one. My remarks will be kind of general in nature, really largely to welcome you and lead you through some of the content of the conference. And I want to start by hopefully going the right way. I liked your references so much, I wanted to show them again. All right. So, at the end of the day, we're all here because we like food. What we don't like so much about food at times are some of the unintended consequences and some of the challenges around it. Today we talk about, and the next couple of days, we talk about the environmental challenges and particularly the climate challenges of one particular food portion, and that's animal source foods. And we know that livestock, as we just heard eloquently presented, does have a significant impact on mainly methane, and that's really where the Achilles heel of animal agriculture lies. Also nitrous oxide. And although the majority of the focus of this conference is on methane, let's not forget we shouldn't be too myopic on just this one gas. There are ways that we can reduce this gas and induce other gases or water pollutants and so on. So I will spare you from that. Today my focus will be methane and also the notion that because of the increasing demand for animal source foods, it's likely that we see an increasing amount of methane throughout the world. That's not necessarily a train we can't stop, I think we can, but it is one that we have to take very seriously. In many different parts of the world, we see the demand for animal source foods increasing. That's true particularly for Asia, it's true particularly for Africa, it's also true for the Americas, and here particularly Latin America. To a lesser extent in Europe and in North America, but the trajectory of an increasing demand for animal source foods is very visible. And that's largely a result of people in developing countries, once they are lifted out of poverty, as one of the first causes of action being to purchase more nutrient-dense food. May it be some eggs or some milk or some meat. That's one of the first things people do in poor countries once they have more disposable income. And this is no deflection of why we are here today, and yes, most of you are from developed countries, but the IPCC and others suggest that 80% of global livestock emissions occur in developing countries. Again, this is not a deflection, but it's just a realization that what we do here is very important, and we need to continue doing research and implement that research in the real world in countries like this. But what's equally or even more so important is that we get this information also to countries like, for example, India or Brazil. These countries alone have more cattle than the rest of the world combined. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very excited that we have delegates from Brazil, delegates from India, here with us today, and also over the last few years. I'm also particularly, yes, the Minister of Climate from India was supposed to be here, couldn't be here because of the conflict with Pakistan that made it impossible. But it just shows to you how important a topic like this has now become to such important countries, and how we are addressing this issue in a very holistic way. So I'm very encouraged by that, and I think all of us are. And that speaks to the importance of parts of the world that I'm alluding to here. You see on this slide, the pretty much the greenhouse gas emissions per unit of edible protein throughout the world, and you see that there are regions that stick out like a sore thumb as having particularly high greenhouse gas footprints per unit of protein produced. It doesn't have to be that way. In many parts of the developing world where that's happening, the focus is certainly currently not on methane. The focus in these areas is to get enough food on the tables and to get enough nutrients produced. That's the focus. But if that can be achieved by increasing efficiencies, we certainly have other parts of the world where we have done that and where we can lend learning lessons and information along those lines. This issue is not a California issue. This issue is not a US issue or an issue of just one area in the world or another. It is a global issue, one that we need to address together. I'm very thankful to your remarks, Alyssa, not just because they were superb, but also because they really summarize very nicely the importance of this gas. There are many, particularly media outlets throughout the world, who simplify methane by simply saying methane is a potent greenhouse gas approximately 30 times more powerful than CO2. Some people say it's 80 times more, depending upon who you believe. They just pretty much say methane is a CO2 on steroids. But it's not that simple. Because of its short-lived nature, methane warms the planet differently. And I know very few slides that exemplify that better than this one here from our colleagues from Oxford University, who show what happens when you increase CO2, in this case here, and methane, that's the top panel, and what those increases of emissions do to warming at the bottom panel, versus what happens when you hold both CO2 and methane constant in the top panel in the center, versus their impact on warming at the bottom center. You see there, if you hold both of these gases constant, then in the case of methane, the related warming is being held constant, but if you have a constant CO2 source, warming always increases. And that is due to the short-lived nature of this gas. But what happens to these two gases when they are being reduced is truly what brings us here today. And that is that when you reduce CO2 here in red, then it takes all the way until you take the CO2 source down or out for that gas to no longer add to additional warming. Yes, CO2 is less powerful per molecule, but it pretty much warms our planet forever. And so unless we stop all fossil fuel burning, we will not stop additional warming from CO2. But the same is not true for methane. And Lisa just elucidated this point, that when we reduce that gas, and significantly so, we actually reduce warming. And that narrative is now oftentimes taken out of context, and it shouldn't be. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. The last thing we want to do is increase it over time. And we have been doing this throughout the world, and we are still doing it today. The least we want to do is hold it constant, or better, find ways to reducing it. And once we do that, the sector that we are representing, which is the agricultural sector and the food sector, has the tool in its hand to reduce warming. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not some kind of creative accounting. It's not some kind of greenwashing, but that's the reality. That the work that we are discussing here the next couple of days has the potential to actually reduce warming. Thank you. So I do think this is really important to point out, because people keep asking, well, isn't methane the super pollutant out there? In my opinion, CO2 is really a super pollutant, because even if we reduce it, we still increase warming. But to me, methane is more of a super opportunity, because if we reduce that, then we can reduce warming, and that's what we should strive for. And so, that to me is really important to point out, because our sector, agriculture, is one of the very few sectors that can do that. Sometimes people can get hung up on verbiage, on semantics. And that's also true for agriculture. Many farmers are really growing tired of being blamed for a changing climate. They are tired of certain terms. For example, when I talk to farmers, and I oftentimes do, I also talk to all the others, dietitians, nutritionists, judges, influencers, high school kids, all of them. When I talk to farmers, I oftentimes hear them being very reluctant to terms like sustainability. They don't like that term. They think it's some kind of a conspiracy against the industry. And I have news for them. They shouldn't be. They should own the concept that's behind it. They should own the term. Why? Because that is at the core of what they do. Let me explain. I do believe that sustainability rests on 5 pillars. One of those 5 pillars is environmental sustainability. Another one is animal welfare and health. A third one is product quality and safety. A fourth one, very important, is workers. Attracting and retaining a qualified workforce. Absolutely essential to sustainability. And last but not least, financial viability. So the environment, food safety, animal welfare, workers, financial viability are the 5 pillars of sustainability. No farmer can do with one of them lacking. And the same is true. The same 5 pillars are what carries stewardship. And believe it or not, I have never once met a farmer who didn't like the term stewardship, who didn't think that he or she was the best steward of the land they have control over, the best steward of the animals that they deal with, the best steward of the products they produce, producing nutrient-rich and safe food to eat, the best steward of the workers who work with them, and the best steward of their financial resources. This is not just semantics that I'm bringing forward here. This is important for us to make sure that farmers are listening to us, that farmers are willing to entertain discussions that we are holding here the next couple of days. When farmers think that this is a blame game, and they shut down and turn into denialists, then we have a much bigger problem than any of you can contemplate right now. It is very important for us not just to do the research and talk about it, but to talk about it in ways they understand. We have to take the farmers along the ride. So, obviously we are here because many of us are scientists, many of us work in agencies and so on. And during this conference here, we will talk about cutting-edge research. We will talk about product development. We'll talk about feed additives. We talk about vaccines. We talk about genetics. We talk about manure management, maybe sequestration. We learn from industry and consumer producing good companies on pathways to get these solutions through the supply chain. We'll have panels on carbon markets. We have panels on the financial sector supporting what we are doing here. It is absolutely essential that we find mechanisms that lead to adoption. That's oftentimes missing. We oftentimes know what tools work, but if we can't get them adopted because there are no mechanisms enabling our farms to do so, and we heard some of that earlier today, then we have a problem. Another panel I'm kind of bullish about, no pun intended, is a panel that we have with Maggie Gill and Kelly Nichols, and they will talk about unexplored impacts of reducing methane emissions. I already alluded to the fact that we can reduce methane, enteric methane, but then induce other things. For example, in my opinion, here the US is oftentimes lagging behind one other region in the world on these topics we're discussing here. And that other region is the place where I'm originally from, Central Europe. There, the discussion over the last few years has all of a sudden changed into reactive nitrogen. When I talk to colleagues here in the US, they're like, reactive nitrogen, what's that? Is that ammonia? No, it's not just ammonia. It's also ammonia, but it's also nitrous oxide. It is nitrite and nitrate. It is a whole slew of nitrogenous compounds that can be affected if we deal with methane and not consider other unintended consequences. Okay? So while this is State of the Science Summit, not the State of the Methane Summit, but the State of the Science Summit, I want to emphasize that while we should have a focus on methane, of course, should not be too myopic and forget unintended consequences. This is really important. What's of course also very important is that we don't forget that all of the stuff that we're discussing here over the next few days costs money. And those reductions of methane that we are discussing generally doesn't make money. It doesn't generate funds to the farmer. So the question is, how can it be funded? It's critical that we accelerate the space, but in order to do so, we have to find mechanisms to fund this acceleration of implementation of techniques, technologies. I am very proud to serve here in the state of California and to work not just with scientific colleagues, not just with agencies, but also to work tightly with our livestock and poultry sectors. Over the last few years, we have worked feverishly in helping our agricultural sector to achieve what I think is a massive goal. A 40% reduction of methane, 40, must be achieved by the year 2030. I repeat that, a 40% reduction of methane, 40, must be achieved by the year 2030 below 2013 thresholds. And that is a goal that is enormous. And at first our farmers said, great, just another environmental law that we need to live up to and achieve. How in the world can we do it? I was just amazed to see what the state had in mind and how the state intended to implement it. Namely, instead of using what I call a cane approach of rules and regulations, fines and or taxes, the state's legislature said, no, let's use a carrot approach. A voluntary incentive-based approach, working with farmers to reduce emissions and incentivize reductions of methane. Let's see how that works. That if you reduce methane, let's say by capping your manure lagoon, and instead of off-gassing methane into the air, we are now trapping it and making this liability methane into an asset. Let's see how that works. And I would have not forecasted it 5 years ago that so many people would do just that. My prediction to you is that in 5 years from now, half of California's dairy manure, and we have a lot of that stuff here, we're producing 20% of US milk in California, that in 5 years, half of our dairy manure will end up producing biogas that will produce fuels to run heavy-duty trucks and buses. Just to give you an idea as to how far we have come, two of my colleagues, Ömer Skibrea, Dan Sumner, and I, wrote a report that's by now peer-reviewed and published on the likelihood for us to achieve that 40% reduction of methane in the years to come. And what we predicted a few years ago was that yes, we will achieve those reductions, and we will achieve them through four main means. The first bucket, I might call it, is the bucket of productivity increases. We are producing more and more milk year by year, and therefore our herd size is slightly shrinking by anywhere between 0.5 to 1%, called attrition. Fewer cows means fewer emissions, not surprisingly. That's one bucket. The second bucket are anaerobic digesters. For those of you who don't come from areas where you have significant manure storage, that's what it is. Manure storage where dairy manure is kept, and instead of letting it off gas into the air, we are capping that gas and then cleaning it up into natural gas. Alyssa talked about that. That's pretty much pure energy. It's going from there into pipelines to our utility companies and then fueling heavy-duty trucks and buses. That is happening at a very large scale. We also have alternative manure practices, and in the future, hopefully, we will have feed additives. I made the remark earlier today on feed additives. My hope is that agencies throughout the state and country and worldwide can really help accelerate the implementation of feed additives, because we need additives in order to achieve the full 40% here in California and worldwide. I just want to give you a few more numbers. So this 40% reduction of methane in the California's dairy industry, and dairy industry alone, equates to a reduction goal of 7.2 million metric tons. 7.2. By now, we have reduced 5 million metric tons. So in 5 years, I am very bullish that in 5 years, we will achieve the 7.2 and outperform it. But we will need feed additives in order to get that done. You will hear more in the next few days, the release of official numbers from the dairy sector in the state on how much methane has been captured from digesters, how much has been reduced from attrition and other means. That is a success that I am very proud of, because the state showed that if they really want to, they can get it done. And if it can get done here, it can get done everywhere. But what's needed for this is that the state, that the government works with the farmers to getting it done. It's not us against them. That mentality will not get us, in my opinion. So, while California has had success with this emission reduction process through incentivization, I'm also intrigued by what's called the split gas approach. Last week I was in New Zealand, and New Zealand has always been a leader in this field of not taking all the greenhouse gases and coming up with a metric that then generates CO2 equivalent units, but instead accounting for the different greenhouse gases separately. CO2 separately from methane, separately from nitrous oxide, because of the fact that these gases behave so differently in how they warm the planet. Uruguay, also here today represented, is following a similar approach. And California, through this 40% methane goal, is also using this approach. And I'm hopeful that this approach will be used throughout the world. We should not try to make methane into some kind of CO2 equivalent anything, because it's very different. It's a different beast, and we should treat it as such. So, at the end of the day, we know what is needed is that we need to reduce the climate impact of animal agriculture. In order to do that, we need to reduce methane. And it's really that simple. If the people in that room cannot get that done, then nobody can. So I invite you to have fruitful discussions, further each other's knowledge along the lines of how we reduce this gas, how we can make it work in the real world, because I'm very bullish that if anywhere it is here where it can start, it's us who can do it, and I invite you to join that along with us. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope that you have a great conference here at UC Davis. Before I hand the microphone over, I want to just acknowledge a few people who have made this all happen, because a conference like this is a significant undertaking. So at first, I want to thank some 70 panelists who have come from all over the world, who will give us the state of the science in this field. Thank you for giving us your time and expertise. We wouldn't be effective without being here. A big thank to our partners, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, and Spark Climate Solutions. Both the CDFA, the Department of Food and Ag, and the college have put a lot of trust in us to develop this program worthy of your collaboration, and we appreciate that tremendously. I also want to acknowledge Jen Taylor, Phil Schwartz, Melissa Hayworth from UC Davis, who have been critical to get this event on the road. I want to particularly acknowledge Charles Brook. Where's Charles? I want to particularly acknowledge Charles Brook with Spark Climate, who has been a huge champion of this event and this space. Without him, this summit wouldn't happen. His tireless efforts deserve more attention than I can give, but they are above and beyond what I could expect from any individual. I want to thank the center that I'm directing and its staff very much. I see how much work goes into this and how much time it takes. I want to thank Ashley Chum. Ashley, where are you? Over there. She has worked so hard behind the scenes and on social media to share this with the rest of the world. I want to thank Kevin Ulrich. Kevin is over here. He is a videographer, a filmmaker in the CLIA Center, and I also want to acknowledge our newest team member, Tracy Sellers. Tracy, where are you? When you will see a report coming out of this, it will be these individuals writing that. They create a fantastic content in and around the summit, and I'm super happy to have those folks around. Of course, I do not want to leave out one of the main people who make this event happen, and that's Joe Broadman. Joe, say hi. Joe Broadman is the Associate Director of the CLIA Center responsible for communication, and he is leading the CLIA Center team to make this work and to make it happen. So, this small group of dedicated individuals has put all of this together, and I mean, they were dedicated. It is a true love, it is a true labor of love, I should say, and I'm super thankful for all of you for making it happen, for the rest of you to be here. I wish all of us a good success, and thanks everybody.